My city, the city you see on your big screen is the city you see on mine. But the city you see on your big screen isn't all there is to see of my city. This is Ibrahim Chavez, inspired by Angelino James Elroy's LA Quartet, doing for the month of December my LA Quintet. And tonight on Watch This with RickRamos, we're going to talk about how many people get another taste of the City of Angels, not through Hollywood, as we discussed previously, but through what Legs McNeil called the other Hollywood, the adult entertainment industry, pornography, the LA sex trade, with Paul Schrader's 1979 film, Hardcore.
You know, it's hard to watch this film 30 some odd years later and not be critical somewhat of its depiction of LA, the sex trade, and those people involved in it directly and on the periphery. I watch this film and I wonder how much of it is a true exploration of that danger versus how much of it is gratuitous and exploitative. I don't know. I can't be sure. I've lived with this movie a long time. I this is one of the earliest films that I watched when I began really getting into cinema. Of course, it was, like I've said in the past, the De Niro connection to Scorsese, into Taxi Driver, and ultimately the writer Paul Schrader being the writer of Taxi Driver, a couple of passes at Raging Bull, The Last Temptation of Christ, later on Bringing Out the Dead. But this seems to me to be another version of the Taxi Driver story. It'd be impossible. I think you'd have to be a fool to not see the correlation between the two films. And yet, where Taxi Driver is an exceptional and beautifully nuanced piece, Hardcore is a much, I don't know how to say it. It seems to me to be a more as much as difficult a viewing as Taxi Driver is, and it must have been for 1976, Hardcore hits it with a little bit more of, the word amateurish comes into play for me, but it's very much in keeping with Paul Schrader's attitudes regarding sex and the sex trade. I mean, hopefully you can help me. Hopefully you can help me figure out what the hell it is that I feel about this movie, because before really getting into talking about it, I had just enjoyed it as a modern day retelling of The Searchers. John Ford and John Wayne's look at basically the same story. So I'm interested in you helping me make sense of all this.
Okay. I'm looking at this film as I'm basically also doing exploitation, because I'm exploiting this film in order to look at LA.
Yeah.
And using it as another look at LA. So last week we talked about Tom Anderson's video essay, Los Angeles Plays Itself. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how many people tend to get their first taste of LA, their sense, their concept of the city through cinema, Hollywood. Not so much Hollywood the place, but Hollywood the industry. And Anderson examines Los Angeles as background, as subject, as character. And I looked at Paul Schrader's Hardcore with these aspects in mind. Mm-hmm. So I started out with this kind of like thesis of like, well, if people tend to get their first taste of LA, people who haven't been here, through Hollywood, then people get another major taste of LA through the other Hollywood, That's the title of Lex McNeil's Oral History of the Porn Film Industry. And this would have been especially true in the 80s and 90s with VHS. So as with Hollywood, the other Hollywood isn't primarily about place, but it's about product, industry, and fantasy. But it's also about how product, industry, and fantasy influence the place, and about how the place and the industry each cast their shadow on the other. So to me, it's about one industry commenting on another industry, and by virtue of the fact that one industry, Hollywood, is commenting on the other Hollywood, it has to Hollywoodize the story. And already starting from that position that you're Hollywoodizing the other Hollywood story, is going to affect the telling. And I see this as kind of like part of a box set that would come with Friedkin's Cruising. Mm-hmm. It's this weird fucking for Cruising, we talked about this. We talked about how it's almost like a ride at Disneyland, where it's not really that deep. You're just kind of sitting in a boxcar, like passing by. It's this kind of like touristy look at it, but through a certain filter, the filter of the director, the filter of the industry, the filter of production, the filter of a compromised ending, whatever. So I think it's not a great film, but I think it's a good example of how Hollywood does this kind of material. But it's also a good example of like whatever it does seem to capture, it's a good example of kind of like the taste of that aspect of Los Angeles that is the direct opposite of Disneyland and Hollywood. The idea of wishing upon a star and chasing one's dream of becoming one. It's the opposite of that, but it's also directly kind of like connected to that. And when that goes wrong. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think there's a part of me that looks at this as being Schrader's second film. I think it's a great film as far as the sophomore effort is concerned. It's very assured. I think it's well made. Schrader has a lot of problems with it. He feels that it's overwritten. There's a lot of good writing in it, but there's also a lot of bad writing in it. And he cites a couple of episodes in the film where there's over-explanation of George C. Scott's character. And in particular, he's talking about the scene where he and Susan Hubley, the young prostitute that he's enlisted to help him find his daughter. Well, basically, the story is that he's a businessman in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's a very religious man in a religion, Calvinism, which I'm not familiar with to a degree. It's a Christian religion with some very foreign ideas to my understanding of the Christianity that I grew up with, is basically being the Catholicism that I grew up in. This idea
it's a rejection of what you grew up with,
basically. Yeah, I guess that is what it is. Yeah.
Well, he's part of the Dutch Reformation Church. So it's a branch of Calvinism that rejected. It's part of the Reformation, so it rejected Catholicism and all the ritual, the pageantry, the pomp. And different aspects that were not fundamental to Christianity or whatever. And so there's the scene you're talking about. You're talking about when they're sitting at the airport, right?
There's the scene sitting at the airport, but Schrader is specifically about the scene on the beach or the boardwalk, wherever they are, outside, and he's starting to tell her about how sex isn't that important to him, um, and there's certain there's a discussion of his view of this versus her view, where she starts saying, Season Hubley says, sex is unimportant to both of us. It's
Yeah, yeah,
you don't involve yourself in it, and I don't give a shit who I fuck. That's how
yeah. Because it's kind of
unimportant.
like
Yeah,
it's just a casual. It's not. Her attitude is as if like, well, um, taking a sip of water is not. Obviously, it's important. It's important for life, but it's kind of like I don't remember every sip of water I take because I don't think of it
yeah.
like that.
Well, in my view, watching it, it's and it's interesting because you have the story as it's being told. This father who is on a journey into a Dante-like inferno, in
Hmm.
a real life
And I'll
Dante's
get into that.
Inferno. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about that. To save his daughter, who he believes has fallen into, who has been pulled into the sex trade. She has disappeared on a school, not even a school trip, a church trip to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, and he finds out after hiring a private detective, a really sleazy guy played by Peter
Yeah.
Boyle. I mean, and I think it's a real,
That goes all the character, which I'll get into,
yeah,
like my takes on that too.
all of it. And I think Boyle is great because he doesn't play up the scumbag character. He allows the scumbag character to be there. We'll get into that, but he finds out that his daughter is working in pornography, and you can imagine that she's also involved in prostitution and a couple other. I mean, it, it he goes there to find her and bring her back, and he employs a young prostitute, sex worker, dancer, porn actress in helping him. And it's I think the point that Schrader is trying to make is the effects that this world has on somebody like this man who is very righteous, who is very judgmental, but he's not a very good man. I think he believes himself to be a good man based on his adherence to the tenets in which he was raised, and he adheres to when he tries to raise his daughter in. But there's this understanding that the level of um, the level of protection or sealing in of his world from this outside world has made it, I don't know if it's made it attractive to his daughter or if it's made her vulnerable to what exists in this world. It's I'm gonna be really interested in what you have to say about its depiction of LA, but I felt as though it's an amped up horror story of what LA is that I kind of saw in the first few years that I was living there, but gradually dissipated because it wasn't as it just wasn't as apparent as it's depicted in this movie. I really have a hard time trying to wrap my head around, is this real? Is it exaggerated? Is it played down? Is it worse? Is it better? I don't know. It's a very conflicting film. I think it's it's conflicting within me to watch it, having lived in LA like I did, um, but to also have what I guess could be considered prudish um, attitudes, because
Mm.
I think as I've gotten older, and I am guilty of porn consumption. I'm not going to sit here on a pulpit try to say that.
It's even interesting that I'm not sorry to cut
Mhm,
you off, but I have to, as you say it, I have to bring it out. Is that
yeah,
you're like I am guilty of porn
Yeah.
consumption, as if you have to confess to it. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, porn isn't that important to me, you know? I'll watch it. I'm watching it right now. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, it's versus like, I too have watched porn, you know, like,
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't mean it to be this. You know what I mean? I don't mean it to be
yeah,
this confessional. Like, oh, I have been delivered. I'm not crying like Jerry fucking Falwell up here, or Jimmy Lee Swaggart. I'm not sitting up here like, oh, I have sinned. I'm just saying that and I think you understand this, and I think maybe you would agree, maybe you wouldn't, maybe you disagree. I don't know. Um, as I've gotten older, I've seen the level of danger that is pornography, and I'm still not in favor of censorship. I still don't think that we should. I'm not joining the Westboro Baptist Church trying to come at it that angle or saying that we're all going to sin and repent. But I do look at it as a means of um, self abuse, and that's not in the sense that a lot of people would take it. But it's a I do believe that porn consumption leads to a level of um, danger to the psyche and your psychological well-being. I think it's bad for you. I really do think it's bad shit, and especially
it's all bullshit and it's bad for you.
it's all bullshit and it's bad for you. Yeah.
As George Carlin said.
But Schrader, it's really interesting because in '79, Schrader said that he cast this young woman as George C. Scott's daughter as Kristen.
Mhm.
He cast her because she had done some softcore and she was willing to do the nudity. It ended up fucking him because the studio wanted
Pun
a searches,
intended.
and yeah, exactly. Um, the studio, Columbia Pictures, no longer wanted the ending that he had originally conceived for the film, but they wanted a reconciliation, they wanted a salvation, and she was an actress that wasn't capable of delivering on that. Um, Performance wise, you can see that at the end of the film, but also story wise, it's problematic in part because of the 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 lack of commitment that Paul Schrader has to the ending that is tacked onto this film, but also I don't think it's a bad ending. I think it's an ending that doesn't. It's not a happy ending. There is no way that this film can have a happy ending because you you do not you do the ending of this film is not an ending. The ending of this film would be the years of psychological treatment that she would have to undergo in yeah, in Grand Rapids, and her falling back into the industry, the drug abuse that she's about to go into if she's not already involved in that, which I highly doubt. And the tenuous and struggling relationship that would be with her father. That would be an interesting film as well. A
I
sequel to
mean,
this film would have been very interesting in that respect.
there's also, it's like, well, now what could have turned into, there are multiple possibilities here.
Yes.
It could have turned into, she was in this industry for a couple of years, found her way out, did whatever, but now her dad took her back to another fucking oppressive
Yes.
environment where she's not involved in sex, but she's forced into whatever else because of just the culture, this Protestant work ethic culture that in certain aspects affect our general society anyway, because our general society is in the United States is a weird mix of of Puritanism and fucking hedonism. Um, and sex sells, but work hard. And so, and then she kills herself. You know what I mean? So who knows?
Well, that's the thing. It's like if you look at true life stories of pornographic actresses, these stories don't normally end well. these women are
Well,
damaged to their
they end up the way that professional wrestlers end up.
yeah.
They die in their 40s or heart attacks, drug.
hmm
Um,
Heart attacks,
and we
drug
did,
abuse, and suicide.
yeah,
Yeah.
or in murder sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
And or the ones that fucking also in true Hollywood form. Certain ones go on to become fucking producers, and they're like the moguls of their own industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's got it all. We did in 2016 episodes 108 and 109 early on in my process with you. We did an exploration of pornography that I think it would be interesting in the coming months to revisit Boogie Nights and to kind of like re-examine some things that have come out since, but also kind of look back and reevaluate and see what are some differences. The question of like hardcore and how it relates to LA as background to me, and this is going into what you're talking about, is like, so as you said, this Midwestern Christian girl takes a field trip from Grand Rapids, the Midwest, to Knott's Berry Farm, which is in Buena Park. It's in the OC. It's close to Anaheim's Disneyland.
Yeah.
They go to Bellflower, which is another little suburb here in the southeastern part. She disappears and ends up in a Los Angeles, but it's a certain Los Angeles that it's not Disneyland. Yeah. It's the neon night Los Angeles, the Los Angeles of red light brothels and bordellos and sun-faded San Fernando Valley motels and skeezy peep show parlors and adult bookstores. And the question of like, does that stuff, like, is that a depiction? We also have to remember that this is 1979.
Yeah.
So it's this late 70s LA West Coast version of Travis Bickle's Times Square.
Yes. That's a very
Times
important
Square,
correlation. That's coming from the same writer, and
yeah,
the same writer, Peter Boyle in both films, and the same director of photography, Michael Chapman. There's a continuation. It's another angle on the same story. It really is. These two films are cousins of each other.
I think they're siblings even.
They might be
potentially.
Yeah.
It's, or at least half.
Sure.
It's LA and New York. A lot of times in the arts, they get in music. It happened with jazz. It's like bebop versus West Coast jazz. With in the 90s with rap, it was like East Coast, West Coast, and typically it's like, well, the obvious thing is that whatever the art form is, even with in the 60s, the Velvet Underground, New York versus like Laurel Canyon hippie shit here on the West Coast. Typically, New York is considered grittier, more fast paced. The stereotypes, a little bit more uptight, a little bit more serious, a little bit more chic. LA is considered more laid back, more casual, more beachy, whatever, more breezy, more stoned.
Well, George Carlin described it as LA, California is like a small woman saying "fuck me," and New York is like a large man saying "fuck you." That's I always love that joke, so I thought it could get it in. But the idea of it is that there's a hardness to New York, where there's a hardness and grittiness to New York, and there's more of a definitely a laid back and just kind of go with the flow kind of attitude to California and LA in specific. Yeah. But yes, there's
also this idea that New York is a place where the people seem mean, but are actually nice. LA is a place where people seem nice, but they're actually fucking mean.
Yeah. Well, mean, self-centered, egotistical,
All
entitled,
of it.
all of that shit.
All of
of
it.
that, everything
If
that
you're on
entails.
that side.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is the Hollywood. This is the LA of Hollywood Boulevard hookers, Santa Monica Boulevard gay hustlers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Circus of Books Netflix thing worth watching if we do the pornography thing. The LA Free Press, which was like a big thing at that time in LA, and even extensions of it into the 90s and 2000s with, do you remember the LA Weekly?
Yes.
It would have articles and it would have like concert. It was this magazine, this LA like periodical.
Yeah.
That it was like a newspaper, and you could go pick it up at newsstands when those things still existed in Hollywood. Yeah, and there's the newsstand on Cahuenga, like right off of Hollywood Boulevard, and right across from the fucking adult book place. Yeah. And on the way to Amoeba and the ArcLight and the Cinerama Dome and all that. And you could flip through and see what was going on that week, what movies, what events or whatever. And in the back you could flip through and see what escorts you could fucking hire. Yeah. And they would have their picture and it would have the phone number and all this crazy shit. There also used to be, I used to go to the drum store a lot in Venice, and there would be these like, it's like those boxes, those booths that had newspapers that you could buy, and some of them.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah. Free. Yeah.
And there would be the LA Express. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember them.
And that one was just all about fucking like sex shit. Going to work, I can still, depending on what route I decide to take, I can, if I want to go like a little long way, I can. Recently, one of the freeways burned in LA.
About this, yeah.
So it's closed. The part of the 10 was closed. So I had to figure out like different ways to go inside. Decided to go way the fuck down and go up. So I went up Figueroa.
Okay.
2:00 in the afternoon because I worked late. Hookers, like how you used to see Jehovah's Witnesses on Sunday. Yeah. They weren't door to door, but they were fucking out there, like corners, like bikinis, 2 p.m. That's today. That's these days. Yeah. But if I go another route, the Spearmint Rhino, Sam's Hofbrau down the street, the Alameda Strip. So it's gotten more so-called cleaned up, but that stuff is still there. And the stuff was there before. Yeah. How Hollywoodized is it? It's another story. But think about downtown LA in the 80s was a fucking dead zone. And so like if you think of these other areas, there are parts of Hollywood that, you know, West Hollywood and then Sunset, like the Sunset Strip and all that stuff is more poppy. But even there, like off the Sunset Strip, there's those little motels and like those little like titty bars and all that shit, right? Yeah. So imagine fucking Yucca, some parts of Franklin. Yeah. For those of you who know Hollywood, you know what I mean? Like places, the Bordner's over there by off of Hollywood, where supposedly the Black Dahlia, and we'll get to that next week, is like one of the last places where supposedly she was seen alive. That's another Hollywood dream, you know what I mean? And so here you have this, you have the place being depicted, and you have other landmarks. When he lands in LA, you see the LAX steam building. There's shots of like this Methodist church that's off of Franklin and Argyle, like where I think Highland, where those streets meet, like a little bit south of the Hollywood Bowl. Yeah. If you know that area, you recognize it. So you have certain aspects of LA, but ultimately this film winds up taking turns into San Diego,
See, I was wondering that as
San Francisco.
yeah, when I was watching it, because I knew you were, I knew that your month was going to be about LA.
Yeah,
I was wondering, did you remember that this, because I haven't seen this film in years. I haven't seen it. I don't even know if we watched it for the pornography episode that we did.
I hadn't seen it for that. It's only after we did that episode, and I think you brought it up, that I watched it, because I hadn't seen it.
You had
if I
never seen
remember
it
correctly.
Oh, okay.
No.
So
it's only in the subsequent years that I've seen it.
I forgot that it went down to San Diego. I forgot that it went up to San Francisco. I forgot that it wasn't exclusively an LA film. I was wondering if that kind of surprised you and disappointed you in a way, because it's a wild ride. It's a really strange. I sympathize with the Van Doren character. I really do feel that I don't think he's a good man. I think he's closed-minded. I think he's very stubborn, and the religious aspect I already have a problem with because of my basic religious beliefs. But I see a man who is very controlling, and when the pieces of his life slowly start to reveal themselves, it becomes a lot more telling. Part of the problem that Schrader has with this film is that he says it's a little bit too talky and they should let things play out. But I think that a lot of the conversations in the film are natural and real, and are dialogue that you can actually imagine people having. I find this film very interesting. And Scott is very convincing, and it's interesting because he's a devout Calvinist. He really believes in the tenets of this religion, and George C. Scott himself was an atheist. George C. Scott did not believe in this kind of repressive, um, not just repressive religion, but this idea of a higher God and a higher being. But he sells it. You believe him. You look at it's a testament to his power as an actor. And then there's the elements of his anger. George C. Scott, I'm talking about his anger embodying the character, because he was going through a lot during this time. The failure of 2 directorial efforts that he had put a lot of money into, his alcoholism, the breakdown of his marriages. He was not an easy man to deal with. And Schrader says, between Richard Pryor in his first film, Blue Collar, and George C. Scott in his second film, he had enough of the really difficult film shoots. He had enough of the really the fucked up stories that could be experienced in a major motion picture. We'll continue along those lines as the episode opens up to us. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, you had asked about how I felt in terms of it ending up in San Diego, San Francisco, to LA, blah blah. I have relatives who live out of state.
Yeah.
And I touched on this last week. They always talk about going to California whenever they visit or whatever. And they don't go to California. They come to LA. That's my take.
Yeah.
The reason is because as a native of LA, I recognize and understand the difference between LA and San Francisco. I understand the difference between LA and San Diego. Southern California and Northern California are very different. Even the Central Valley is different. The politics are different. Even, they're, as fucking Gavin Newsom will tell you anytime and I'm not a pro or against him, whatever, but I'm just saying is, give him an opportunity, he'll tell you, we are the 5th largest economy in the world. And there's agriculture here, there's tech, there's all this shit that's happening here in LA outside of just Hollywood, the industry. And California is very diverse. But it also has it's like, I think it might be the largest Mexican population in any city outside of Mexico City.
Yeah.
If Leslie and I go, whenever we go to the places where Spanish is spoken, they always say, well, where are you from? And we say LA. And they say, oh, you speak Spanish so well. And then it's weird to us with that, like, our bilingual privilege or whatever, because we're kind of like, we take it for granted. But it's also like, well, like, sort of ignorantly to ourselves, we're kind of like, well, doesn't everyone speak Spanish in LA? Which they don't. Because you can be in Monterey Park and be like, well, doesn't everyone speak Chinese?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that being said, I'm going to diverge even more to answer your question. California has a Spanish colonial history. So, and I think I touched on this when we did Zoot Zoot, maybe. The coastline is peppered with missions.
Yeah.
And it's peppered with towns, wherever these missions are, that have the names of saints, so religious names. So Our Lady of the Angels for LA, or Sacramento all the way to the north. These are all these missions up and down. So San Diego, San Onofre, San whatever, and then you keep going up: Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, San Jose, San Francisco, etc. It's because of the mission system. And so that mission system is called the Camino Real, the King's Road, the Royal Road. And watching this film, I'm thinking of that because he goes LA, San Diego, San Francisco. He's doing this infernal kind of Dante's Inferno / Camino Real. But it's not, I mean, the missionary system was like oppressive, genocidal, colonial thing. Mm-hmm. But this is now, he's doing his own kind of version. It's like this weird with his religion and talking about his religion at the airport to this prostitute that is like this, that he's hired. Mm-hmm. He's hired a prostitute, not for sex,
but as a guide.
But to be as a guide and like this kind of like proxy for his daughter. This like hooker with a heart of gold surrogate. There are all these different cities, but it's kind of like, if you don't pay attention to if you don't know any better, like my relatives that are like, oh, well, it's California. The exact backgrounds supposedly may be San Diego or San Francisco or certain parts of LA, but the backdrop is always Hollywood.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The backdrop itself is going to be the other Hollywood, told through a Hollywood film. And then, as I said earlier, you take that VHS and later DVD, and you pop it in the machine. It doesn't matter if you're in Grand Rapids or Tuskegee or wherever the fuck you're at. You're getting a piece of LA as a product, and that will be in the background of these people getting fucked or fucking or whatever they're doing, or these people killing each other on your Charles Bronson movie or whatever it is. It's like you're getting Hollywood, and in the background you're getting the other Hollywood. So to me, it's the fact that it ends up in San Diego and it actually ends in San Francisco means nothing, because it's still Hollywood to me.
That's interesting.
Because it's this idea, you know what I mean? And then like you started to go into like character aspect. The LA of hardcore is scheming, skeezy, sleazy, scummy. I think it is that Dante's Inferno, that descent into hell. Instead of searching for Beatrice, his love, he's searching for his daughter, like you said in the sutras. His Virgil, his original guide is Peter Boyle's slimeball private detective. And this is an interesting, to me, connection to like the LA. I mean, on the surface, it's kind of, as we talked about, it's Taxi Driver. So it's like, he's another version of the Wizard.
Yeah.
In this film. But he's part hard-boiled private eye of noir LA pulp fame. Because that's historically an LA thing too, is that private eye of noir. But he's also part washed out Doc Sportello of Thomas Pynchon's novel Inherent Vice. He's like this stoned out fucking like, which is also somehow you can connect that also with like The Big Lebowski. Yeah. It's all within the same universe, and you're like, this guy is the fucking private eye. But this private eye is the one that didn't get hired for Roger Rabbit. You know what I mean? Like this private eye is the one that like, he's that guy that you might find next to the bail bonds place, but also next to or in the strip club, in the topless bar having a beer. And you get to see George C. Scott. You started talking about George C. Scott's kind of the shit that was going on in his life that affected, that you probably bled into the performance. And then as it meets the character, who's this puritanical Calvinist Protestant work ethic, that you get to see Pavonine, I think, is the color, this tone of blue, that you get to see this moment where he's like, it's too, I don't even remember what the word.
Tulip?
The word that.
Tulip.
No. Tulip is the acronym for his
belief.
His like reform belief systems. But in his business in Grand Rapids, this designer that he's hired.
The color, the blue.
The color, yeah. And he, I don't remember exactly what adjective he uses to describe it, but he says that it's basically.
I think he said it's overpowering.
Maybe, yeah. But it's also, you get the sense that it's also too stimulating.
Yeah.
Not necessarily sexy, but it's too it's too exciting. Tone it down is the idea, right?
Yeah.
And you have this like work montage, and it's just kind of like, just work, motherfucker, like work for your fucking salvation. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. But as he descends into this other Hollywood, picking up, he's going to all these fucking porn shops. He's kind of like these Protestant kind of satanic panic characters that you would see in the 80s. That they would warn about the dangers of this and that. And it's like, well, how do you know about it? Well, because I've done extensive research. And they'll fucking play you every goddamn satanic message in the book. And they spent hours and hours and hours looking and listening. And they'll talk to you about how, this thing is pornography. I'm not going to show you, but I watched it. Just
trust me.
Take what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust me. So he's like, in the beginning, it's like the fucked up part is that Peter Boyle's character takes him, he rents out this like peep show theater because he was able to find, and this is going to be an important aspect in terms of, I think, subject, in terms of where LA is at this time and where the industry is at this time. He finds like a reel of his daughter. Peter Boyle's character finds a reel of George C. Scott's character's daughter, and so Peter Boyle's character plays it for him, and he's an audience of one, and he's watching his daughter in the scene, and he's like, finally, he's just like, turn it off, and it's this moment where he's like, it goes, turn it off. It's like five times, I think he says, turn it off, and it escalates.
Yeah.
But he keeps digging in deeper, and he keeps exploring, and you can see that it's changing him. There's even one point where he has auditions for these male actors because he's trying to find one of the guys from that scene with his daughter.
Yeah.
And at one point, one of the guys he's auditioning is like, well, okay, well, don't you want to see my stuff? And then George C. Scott's like, what do you mean? And he's like, my stuff.
Yeah.
And
then they give you the graduate shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And the interesting thing to me is that he was like, okay, sure. Just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
And kind of like, what I asked myself was like, at what point did it change from this fucking Calvinist, like upright citizen, from being outraged at even the thought of sex outside of procreation, and sex isn't important to me, but then my daughter and all this and that, and it's like, no, I don't want to see your fucking stuff. At what point does it go from that to, fine, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah,
he's not even outraged.
No,
he's just completely just kind of like, you could have just shown me a picture of a fucking doorknob.
Yeah.
That it doesn't excite me, but at the same time, it doesn't even upset me. It's just, I don't care. That, like, to the point where he becomes violent, which is understandable in terms of the context of his daughter. But what was crazy to me is when he becomes violent with the prostitute.
Yeah.
He fucking slaps her, and then she's crying, and then they start to take on this dynamic. It's a father-daughter dynamic, but it's also a pimp-hoe dynamic.
Yeah.
Because he slaps her, and then he comforts her.
Well, wait a minute.
And
he slaps her, and then he grabs her by the throat, and he makes her think that he's going to punch her in the face. Maybe he is. I don't know. But he holds her down with that punch, and he's like, you're going to tell me where he is. And it's obvious that the Season Hubley character, the prostitute, is obviously psychologically damaged. She's fucked up. She's in the industry. She has, armchair analyst, but there's a sense of lack of self-respect. And that's what these people prey on. And I think with this world, it's very important that Schrader has recognized that, especially at 78, 79, when this was filmed, Schrader made it a point of the daughter not being too pretty, because she's nothing.
She's nothing.
Well, I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. I'll say it in the respect of what?
That attitude kind of captures the like dime a dozen fucking like
exactly.
Like,
but this is the thing that Schrader in 78, 79 versus Boogie Nights in 91, 92, where Schrader said she needed to be just a homely girl that would be easily enticed into that world, because the pornography of the 70s was not the pornography of the 80s and the 90s, and he says this in the commentary, the pornography of the 80s and the 90s would be the cheerleaders and the jocks, the captain of the football team and the cheerleaders would be lulled into pornography, whereas the pornography that he's depicting is more the cast-offs, the strays, the runaways, the people who felt like they didn't fit in and were never, I don't know who.
Yeah, these are the second generation Manson family girls,
Yeah,
basically.
it's a lot of times where
Um,
people would. I don't remember where I heard this, but um, you tell a pretty girl how smart she is because she never hears that. You tell a smart girl how pretty she is because she never hears that. And
mhm.
there was definitely that sensibility of telling somebody like Kristen how pretty she is, and you see her in that early scene where she's very puritanical in her dress, collar all the way up to her neck, up to her chin basically, and then when she gets to L.A., she's in the bell bottoms and a sweater, and the next time you see her, she's in hot pants and a very
Well,
tight
yeah.
fitting shirt because it's like this is, you know, it's very Jodie Foster esque. Um, the depiction later on, and it's fucking it's creepy. It's a creepy film, but I think I don't know if Schrader is trying to simply tell a story or being cautionary and part of or trying to tell a cautionary story, which is like two different things because Schrader, part of the problem that he says he has with this film is that there's too much exposition. There's too much talking and it becomes a pulpit type of film. I don't get that perception of it. I think this is a very up until the end, I think it's a very good film. Um, but I think it's a very Schrader growing up in the restrictive religion and culture that he grew up in versus the world that he entered into as a film critic and then as a film writer, screenwriter, and director. Um, there's a very uncomfortable, incredibly uncomfortable handling of sex and sexuality.
Mhm.
What's your opinion there? What do you am I making sense? Do I,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some of the stuff that he's critical about are maybe he sees too much of his own shit in there,
hmm
even more than we see.
well, I think it's very telling because he says his two biggest failings as a director are this film and Light of Day. And if you know either of these two films, Hardcore is based on his father. The Van Doren character is based on his father. The
Mm,
Jenna Rollins character in Light of Day is based on his mother. I think both films are exceptionally well made. I think the performances are good, and I think they're both very good films. The problem that Schrader has with the films, I think, is that he's a little bit too close to the material, and I think it's a little bit
mm,
too close to the depiction of his growing up, so that even though it's his film, his writing, his direction, he cannot be objective about it.
yeah,
Yeah. So.
I mean, it's in terms of the like. I think you hit it also. Interestingly, and I'm gonna get into this now in terms of subject is like the casting of whatever that actress's name is.
I think her name was Isla Davis, the young girl who plays his
The
daughter.
daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is like at the end of the first golden age of porn.
Yeah.
Um, so you're seeing a transition, but this is also like this is street level.
hmm
Um, this is, as I said earlier, it's an one industry commenting on the other through the Hollywood filter, and whether it's as you touched on this also is like, is it whether it's with a compromised Hollywood ending where the dad finds the daughter, or B, it's a kind of porn panic cautionary tale
That's a
that's
great
partially
description.
true.
Thank you for clearing that up for me. Yeah, that's a great description. Porn panic.
Yeah, I mean, it has that kind of, it's in that era. It's in the don't listen to fucking Ozzy Osbourne because you're gonna kill yourself.
hmm
don't listen to Led Zeppelin because they worship the devil. Just listen to listen to it backwards, and we'll tell you why you shouldn't listen to it at all. Or don't listen to in a few years Beat It because that's about masturbation somehow. You know what I mean? And don't play Dungeons and Dragons because it glorifies the occult. Don't do Halloween because it glorifies the occult. Don't blah blah because blah blah. Everything is wrong. Don't masturbate because your palms will get hairy or you'll die blind. Or you'll go blind. Yeah. Exactly. It's the adolescent's moonshine. You know what I mean? Like you'll fucking go blind if you jerk off. And if you're a female, we're not even going to talk about female masturbation, so don't even worry about it because it's as if it doesn't exist. So there's that panic era, but it's also there are elements that are partially true because pimps and producers do prey on those children of the night that they can discover. You know what I mean? There's do you know that neo soul R&B artist named Miguel? Are you familiar with him?
No.
He has a song called Hollywood Dreams, and it talks about this. We did an episode on pimps, and that episode is 161 from 2018, and I don't remember the pimp's name. He's like children of the night, bitches on skateboards. He's like, I'm out there like the werewolf of London.
I remember that, yeah. Like creepy shit, man. Yeah.
And that's like a movie that's like fucking extremely quotable. And Hollywood Dreams from Miguel, some of the lyrics are lost angel with an urgent set of jaded eyes, this empty fixation, sweet Hollywood sign, you're my salvation. Cokey scenes full of pipe dreams, palm trees, and a numb sensation. Vivid schemes, chasing vivid schemes, put my name on a marquee, still waiting for my big break for fame's sake. See, the walk of fame became your religion, woman. Unique as you are, your faith is common. Now the walk of shame, woman, its reputation, cheap thrills, fake friends, coke binge, what a numb sensation. He said, honey, I can put your face on the big screen. And then it goes on to say, up and down Hollywood and Sunset, up and down Jefferson and Crenshaw, Figueroa, Alameda, Slauson, west to Santa Monica Boulevard, lost Hollywood dreams. That song is within the last few years. That's not in the days of Paul Schrader doing fucking this film, or that's not fucking Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
It's not David Lynch doing those films. It's not Sunset Boulevard by any means, but it is. It is.
Well, that's the thing. The story stays the same. The characters are different. The clothing is different. The setting. It's all
and the character gets older. L.A. because that is the character.
Yeah.
Hollywood, and the other Hollywood. Those characters, they get older, but it's like it's fucking Matthew McConaughey as Wooderson and fucking Dazed and Confused. I get older, they stay the same age.
Well, I was on the Strip for probably 5 years working at the Comedy Store, either as a comic or as a door guy, and I saw the Comedy Store is a weird kind of place that attracts misfits and attracts. It wasn't corporate. I don't know what it's like now. I hear that it's been cleaned up a little bit. It's like Times Square now. It's a lot more corporate and it's a lot more family friendly, I guess you would say. But at the time I was there was a lot of weird shit. We had a lot of strange people coming through there. Um, but I remember, and this is the time when this is probably 2002, maybe 2001, 2002. Hugh Hefner. They were making a
Hmm.
big deal out of Hugh Hefner because he had like these 7 brain dead bimbos that were his girlfriends basically.
Well, they had that show, right?
This was before
Or
that
was it
show.
before?
That show was whittling it down to 3 girls. But this is
Yeah.
back when it was 7 or even 9, and they would travel, and it was a thing to hype up Hugh Hefner and what a fucking stud he was. And yeah, he's this old man, but he's got this sexual prowess, and it's like it was fucking embarrassing because they would get him together for the TV show, but when you saw him in person, he was a fucking decrepit old man. And it was sad to see because it was like you're an embarrassment. But the girls, there was an emptiness in those eyes. It was just like, and you could tell that they were fucked up and they were trying to have as good a time as they could. I maybe I'm reading into this, but what I saw was a weird kind of depravity there and um a lack of self-awareness. Um and I had seen these girls in the magazine. I had seen a few of them in the magazine, and to see them up close, you really got a picture of the plastic. And I'm not talking just about the silicone and the work, the collagen and all that. I'm talking about
Yeah.
just the
They become
fucking
like Stepford wives.
yes. Oh, absolutely. They were well, Stepford side chicks is what they were, really, if you really want
Yeah.
to break it
Yeah.
down. And I remember being like just kind of disgusted with not them so much as this is what the industry is. And just
Yeah.
kind
This
of
is what
like,
it
ugh,
makes.
yeah, this and it
Um.
and I had seen hardcore at that point, and I had seen Taxi Driver, and we some of the guys had joked about it, and that's eventually that would turn into the fucking TikTok, Instagram, she belongs to the streets kind of attitude.
Yeah. Hmm.
And we've laughed about that, but it's crazy that town, by virtue of the entertainment industry that it is, and the hopes and the dreams, it sucks that into it and it spits these people out. Because I remember seeing at the Comedy Store Playboy models from the 80s who were trying to hold on in the early
Hmm.
2000s. And there was a there was a little bit of a sadness there where you're looking at it going, "Damn, girl, it's over. You really need to stop this shit because this is no longer working. Um, you've passed your sell by date." That's a real shitty way to describe these people, but at the same time, when you position yourself as nothing more than a commodity, um, you have to look at it from that perspective. You have to at least acknowledge that perspective of it. Um, and that was 20 years after Paul Schrader's film.
Yeah.
So it's a weird kind of Paul Schrader's film in '79, Paul Anderson's film depicting that same era in 90, what was it, 94, 95?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And
after
maybe a little bit earlier.
maybe. And then after Porn Ends in the mid 2000s, those documentaries, um, you just see a level of, I mean, it's hard for me not to project onto it, but there's just a level of sadness to it where you look at
Well,
these people and you're
yeah.
just like, fuck.
Well, it's interesting because it's like even the idea of like the after porn ends,
Yeah.
um, those those women, a lot of them are from like the second or maybe the end of the second wave of golden age porn history or whatever, because they come out of Vivid of entertainment. Like before I get into that, I saw Anna Nicole Smith in the early 2000s. We used to always go to China. Well, one of our places was fittingly Chinatown.
Yeah.
We would go to Grand Star. We would fucking do our thing, and she was shooting something. It was like a commercial or a photo shoot or something. I think it was a photo shoot, and she was like in a director's chair, and she was like under all these like Chinese lanterns, and she was already like she was a little bit bigger.
Okay, so this is before the rapid weight loss near the end of her life, but after the guess period.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and she's already like it's not just, oh, there's that chick from the ad that's kind of reminiscent or like kind of a throwback to Marilyn Monroe. It's no, that's Anna Nicole Smith. And I think she died in 2007. So this is like probably 2000, I want to say, let's just say 2002. I don't know, but around there. And so it was, you know, we'd either done a show or rehearsed or whatever the fuck we did. And it was, she had this energy, she exuded sexuality.
Yeah.
But there was also like, I don't know if she was already fucked up, like, and what I mean is like literally like intoxicated, fucked up, because she was like very bubbly, but it seemed like also, and there was something very Lynchian about that moment, because I was waiting for like a little person to come out and talk backwards, like it had that vibe, you know what I mean? And I made some comment and about how weird it felt, and that's kind of like what that is, you know what I mean? It's that, or I've been working on a writing project, that deals with some of these aspects. It's not about this industry, but it has to do with kind of like predation and the predatory aspect of all the people that are involved. So if you think of like, if we were to transfer it to this, or let's say you think of like prostitution, it's like, well, you go to Figueroa and you see the women on those corners, and maybe you're thinking, well, the pimp is preying on these girls. But you see cars doing these fucking U-turns and all this crazy shit. And there's a predatory element to them too, but then they're going to pay for it. And there's a predatory element of the prostitute.
Wait a minute. What do you mean they're going to pay for it? They're going to pay for it in the long run?
Johns are going to pay.
For the sex?
No, okay, yeah. They're going to physically pay money for sex.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
And so the John is on the hunt.
Yeah.
Prowling around looking for the one, right? The prostitute is on the hunt. She's lying in wait for the prey to come so that she can snag them. The pimp is lying in wait so that the hoes, as they call them, can get the Johns or the tricks, and then they can bring them the money. But the pimp also knows that on some level, if he's not, whatever his technique or whatever his shit is, if he's not up on his pimp game, as they say, the prostitute will leave him for someone else, and he has to make sure that she doesn't lie to him, steal from him, do whatever the fuck, because it's kind of like in that world, it's not just this one way fucking predation. It's kind of like this is an LA, this is a Hollywood where it's kind of like I know who I can trust to a point, but I can only to a point trust myself, and everyone's fucking each other over, like literally and metaphorically, like all the way around.
Yeah, it's true.
And so there's this sense of like in American Pimp, they talk about like they've seen guys come in with these rolls of money and cars and shoes and all that, and then leave with fucking shoestrings holding up their pants because they talk about this. Some other guy will come and steal their chicks, or else the chick will test you. The chick will do this. The chick will do that. I mean, it's also through their mouth, but it's like there isn't. It's very, very blurry. It's not abuser victim. They're in a sense they're all abusers, and in a sense they're all victims.
And that's part of the problem with the film. With I think some of the reviews found the film problematic because the girl, the daughter, Kristen, is a plot device. She's just a tool there. You never get to really find out about her life or what has pulled her in, and I find that to be a little bit limited in the criticism because everything is there and what works about the ending for me is that you realize she didn't get sucked into that world.
Right.
She went into it willingly because, and I don't think she was prepared for it. I think she is a victim. However, I think that the father's restrictiveness and his inability to relate to her has put her into that, which is, yes, there's her story would make a fascinating film. It would make a great film. That story has been told, I think, in past films, but it's really interesting that you see this man positioned as a loving father who cares about his daughter. But every action that he does in the film, his attitude, the way he carries himself, and it's a testament to the power of George C. Scott in the role, is that you realize he's not a good man. He's not a nice man. He's not in a way, to a big degree, he's responsible for his daughter's descent into this world. He's driven her there.
He already drove his wife away.
Yeah. And that, without that moment, I think the fact that Season Hubley deduces that and brings it out of him, you're like, oh shit, absolutely, yeah. How the fuck did I not see that, you know?
And it goes to show how people in these situations have to learn to fucking read people with uncanny levels of like nuance, and they have to see people's intentions. Because these are people that are vulnerable all the time. They learn shit. You know what I mean? Like they're just as manipulative as the one behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that it's crazy that and I'm not like endorsing or anything like, and I'm not taking moral judgments or whatever. I'm just looking at this as an Angelino, and as myself as doing this show. But it's James talk about there's a series you can find on YouTube. It's kind of exploitative. This guy interviews like all these like street people and all crazy stuff. And
oh yeah, I've heard of this. I've seen this.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's like black and white, and I don't remember what the name of his channel is, but he interviews like a lot of street type people,
whores and pimps, yeah,
and I think like probably
some
addicts,
drug addicts
and other stuff,
yeah,
and in one interview, because I saw that maybe last week. I was just watching it, and he interviewed one of the pimps from American Pimp, and that guy has since died. And I think it's in that conversation that it comes up, this attitude of like, well, she's gonna do it anyway, so she might as well have guidance in that system, in that industry of prostitution. And so it's this weird parasitic like relationship where it's kind of like, well, I'm gonna help her out, but obviously she's gonna help me out because she's fucking paying, she's giving me the money. But she's also gonna like take from me because I'm giving her structure, whatever the fuck that supposedly she needs, blah blah blah. But so there's that aspect of like, this all came out of the prostitute's character being able to read that George C. Scott's character had driven his wife away. But getting back to his daughter, yeah, she wasn't like trafficked in terms of like kidnapped and sold into sexual slavery. She ran away. Yeah. And in this, coming from a world where they believe in predestination.
Yeah.
So they believe that there are certain number of people who are chosen by God, ordained to be saved. And that if you, that also means that if you're not of that number, then you're basically ordained to be damned. And I mean, that's what it is, and within that belief system. And so at that point, it's like, well, she has agent. The idea is that she doesn't have agency, but she does have agency because she's the one that ran off. Whether she was manipulated or not, she's the one that went on that fucking journey.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in a world of predestination, it's like, was she predestined? I mean, not in terms of salvation, but also just in terms of, let's pretend everything happening as the will of God, who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-present. I mean, she's damned from the beginning, from before she was born. You know what I mean? Or is she? And
yeah, within the beliefs, yeah.
So there's that. But if we go back to the idea of like, well, she just looks kind of like this small town girl or whatever. This is both Hollywood's in transition at this point. The film appears at a time, it's like, as I said, it's contemporary to Friedkin's Cruising, probably just a year or two before, where both Hollywoods are changing. This is post Deep Throat with Porn Chic, where you had like higher production values, scripts, the idea of like going to see certain porn films like in a theater on an opening night where it's like a thing. And we talked about Deep Throat, the film. This is towards the end of the first golden era of pornography where you have all that. This is really like the blowing up of AIDS. This is before John Holmes's involvement in the Wonderland murders and ultimately his death. This is the moment where you see a transition from big screen and larger production values to VHS.
Yeah.
So the idea of him having this, finding both of them, the Peter Boyle's character and the George C. Scott character, having this reel, and it's like, well, what's this movie called? It doesn't matter what it's called. Today it's called this, tomorrow it's called that. It's just a fucking throwaway. That's VHS already, like.
Yeah. He's
That's
very. I
that
mean,
mentality.
I thought it was very, really well written. Where it's like, it doesn't exist. The people in it don't exist. They didn't do it. You don't exist watching
It-
it. It's this
right.
underground thing that we're ashamed of, but that we're enticed by. And there's a reason that the sex industry, that the pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and yet nobody watches porn. You know?
In a weird way, it's also like it's it's just a tool to get off, and then that's it. It's not considered an art form. On some level, there were those people in the golden age that were like, yeah, we're making sex movies, but we want them to have some kind of other value.
Well, it's certainly not, for whatever was made, it was not Oshima. I think it was Oshima, in the realm of the senses. That's a sexual film, but that's an artistic film. That's probably the only artistic pornographic film. And I would say that it is a pornographic film. But is it art?
Yeah,
that's an artistic
and then
film.
that's when we get into, that's like this question of like, well, what is erotica? What is porn? Whatever. But this is straight to video, disposable movies, and disposable stars and disposable starlets. In the second golden age, the one that you said Schrader talked about, the cheerleaders and the jocks, that's the other Hollywood of Legs McNeil's book. That's going to be where you get a return of, now, because of these bigger distribution companies and these bigger porn production companies in the San Fernando Valley and in Burbank and in those areas, you get your, like Jenna Jameson coming out of that, like those stars that become kind of underground household names because they're marketed as like part of this team of like the Vivid Girls. But it's only certain ones that rise to that top level. And it's also in the way that like the tastes change and the looks, and then off of that, when you get cable, and you have softcore stuff too, how much, or even the magazines, and in the future, I do want to talk about Hustler and Playboy and culturally and all that shit. But you have how many that don't make it to that upper echelon that just become, they're just in the magazines, or they're just or they do stripping, or they do Lisa Ann didn't really blow up until she did that Obama thing, the Sarah Palin, which was much later. And if I remember correctly, she's from that, she might be from that like 90s era when she started. And a lot of those women, like the after porn ends, a lot of them like had a more of an entrepreneurial mindset after, but it's like those are only like a fragment of the ones that even made it to that top level. So you see all that transition from mob run porn in New York and sleazeball Hawaiian shirt wearing producers in North Hollywood here on the West Coast. And this girl in this film is caught in that. And now, and post DVD and all that shit, with internet, it's kind of like, is there such a thing as a porn star? That I think it's probably fewer and further between. It's like whatever porn stars exist nowadays, it's kind of throwback of that old mentality, because there's so much content now just on the internet and OnlyFans and all that stuff like that, that it's like, I don't know. I don't know who.
That's the industry as a whole, though. It's like because
what
is a star? Whether it's in conventional films, it's like, who is a star right now?
Because that was happening with VHS. Because in that was the other Hollywood. In the regular Hollywood, it's like, well, how much shit was just now straight to video?
Yeah. But think about it.
What is a star?
Yeah, it's like near the end of his career, Bruce Willis wasn't headlining major motion pictures. He was doing straight to video. and he was a
Yeah.
star. He was one of the biggest. You don't see a Dustin Hoffman, a Pacino, a De Niro. Those guys are still those guys, but are held up to an old man reverence. The
Right.
industry has changed to the degree that it's no longer the star maker that it once was, because content, I mean, there's so much fucking content out there. And as far as being able to photograph people fucking, if you go to Pornhub, some of it is just a woman riding a cock. You see no face, you just see tits. Tits and ass and her cunt. That's it.
Well, I mean,
And then
already at this
that
point, they have,
releases, yeah.
well, they already have models that are just AI,
AI, yeah. There's that too.
so that they don't have to pay a person. It's just that's all it is. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so there's that. There's at this point the deep fake stuff where you get to mix both Hollywoods. You get to mix the face of some star that you're attracted to or whatever,
Well,
and then
like
put
you
on the
get,
body of some anonymous porn star, and then now it's just like, and you know it's fake.
well, that's the thing. It's like you're getting a 50-some-year-old Jennifer Aniston in her 20s
Yeah,
on a different body fucking. And
yeah,
then
or
your mind fills in the blanks. Suspension of disbelief. It's the power of cinema. It's the power of the mind to create something that you want to see.
well,
Um,
it's also the yeah, because it's also the idea of like what's attractive about it is that it's not. It's not that you think it's Jennifer Aniston; it's that you know it isn't.
yeah.
But your mind is looking at something that appears to be that, and it's exciting because
Mhm.
it's fake. And there's there's that element to it. There's, as you said, like what is a star anymore?
Yeah.
It's all, and then interestingly, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I think that the Kardashian sex tape was distributed by Vivid,
I
if I'm
think
not
it was
mistaken.
either Vivid or Wicked, which one of those
One
companies
of
picked it up.
those second golden age porn
Hmm.
distribution houses that picked it up and basically propelled her into fucking mega like stardom.
Hmm.
And she's been able to parlay that into all this other shit. But like, remember Jennifer Anderson in the, I mean, no, Pamela Anderson in the 90s was like, oh my God, Baywatch and all that shit.
Hmm.
So she was Playboy or whatever she was doing, and then TV, and then tried to do film. I think it was Barbed Wire was like
Yeah, that was
her
the film.
thing, and it fucking tanked. And then the sex tape with Tommy Lee, but that didn't like shoot her into. At this point, she's a relic of the '90s, of like
Yeah.
these '90s beauties, these
Well,
'90s like
look what she's doing now,
sexy
though. Have you
people.
seen what she's doing now?
I have no idea what she's doing now.
Uh, I think she removed the implants, and anytime she appears in public, no makeup. So she's not
Hmm.
she leaned right into it because she knows that she's never going to be Baywatch Pamela Anderson, and people are giving her so much credit, and so, and, it's such a brave move on her part, and maybe it is, but it's like, there's a part of me that just says, if you didn't know the wall was there, then that's your fault. You were going to hit that wall at some point. That anybody who is an entertainer, you reach a point of saturation or you reach a point of diminishing returns, and it's just no longer, you have not. And and when your career is built around tits and ass and a beautiful face, that shit's going to end. It's going to end, or you're going to become a parody of yourself. And you see that with my God, I don't know how many times I saw women in the industry. Just if you look at Meg Ryan in this last film that she directed, it's like there is no way that a woman has aged in that manner. And now for those people, I mean, anybody who's listening to this might say that I'm misogynistic, ageist, but the truth is, you if you know how a person ages, you know that that's not it. The problem with it is we want our stars to remain who they once were, and they just can't
Yeah.
do that. So if we're guilty of anything, it's that. As an audience, if we're guilty of anything,
And then what we start to do as an audience is we start criticizing the plastic surgeons.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, whoever did that did an amazing job on whoever the fuck we're talking about. Like, look at, or that person, and it will look like body modification to me is a personal choice. I have no problem with it. I don't care. What we're talking about is these industries that do turn us into commodities.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The commodification of yourself in order to further this career or this idea of what you're supposed to be.
And in a greater sense, kind of the Byung-Chul Han, the philosopher, talks about us all now as being achievement subjects. It's kind of like that's kind of where we are as a society, is that we're expected to not only be all this other shit, now we have to be fucking entrepreneurs, and we have to be we all have to be these like projects that we're constantly working on, and like now it's not just follow your passion because it's a dream because you want to go to Hollywood to be famous. It's like, well, with the internet and social media and where it is now, it's like you don't have to go to Hollywood. You should be following your dream like every day as your side hustle, and you should still work. And why aren't you making fucking 10K a month on the side?
Mm-hmm.
Fuck your primary shit. That's on the side, motherfucker. And you should have a 6-pack. And then now if you're in one of these industries, it's like, well, what are you doing to keep up? Because there's someone else behind you younger that's going to fucking take it away. Yeah. And it's always been like that. That these industries are full of that. Peg Entwistle jumping off the Hollywood sign and Hollywood Babylon and all that shit. You know what I mean? Like, and that's in any kind of like creative endeavor where there's a mixture of the artist and the art, as the commodities are mixed. And it's like some people know how to ride the wave. A lot of it is luck. Keith Richards is alive. We've talked about this in part because of luck. Jimi Hendrix is not. Yeah. Jim Morrison is not. Those, a lot of those people are not. And what happens, as I was saying, with the critique of the plastic surgeon, it's like, well, look at how this motherfucker like fucked up his face. This person fucked up his own face by going to that guy, and that guy fucked up his face by doing it.
Yeah.
Or it's just like, oh my God, like look how amazing she looks or whatever. And you hear all of that stuff more often than just kind of like, oh, that's cool that this person, and mostly it's women, because it's like men have the luxury of being able to like, yeah, people said, Jack Nicholson let himself go, but at the same time, he was still like, oh, he's still a ladies' man to this day, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Whereas women, it's kind of like, it's a complete double standard, because it's like, oh, look, she fucking let herself go.
Yeah.
Like, who was it? Was it Lauren Bacall, or who was it that said men get older, women get old?
I remember that. I think it might have been Lauren Bacall. Yeah.
And Hollywood is fucking full of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul Newman looked better in his old age to some people. There was distinguished. There was a distinguished quality. There was Yeah.
And already that, it's like, these are the Paul Newmans of the world. These are not fucking like the average Joes.
No.
Like Paul Newman already was like fucking handsome. You know what I mean? Like this is already, um, people were looking at his head from the early days and going like, well, okay, put that to the side, because even if whether he can act or not, at least, you know, we're in the business of photography here. We can figure this out. And women don't have that luxury in these industries and in this culture, unless they're already seen as like, Meryl Streep didn't put herself in that position, and she was already something else, and it was like, oh, young Meryl Streep is pretty, she's beautiful or whatever. So she didn't follow that track. But if you get into kind of what you're talking about, this sexualized track, then it's kind of like, wait, what are you doing? Like, you're not doing the sexy thing anymore? No. Everyone is expected to evolve, but at the same time, they're expected on some level to stay the same. And if they don't evolve, they're fucked in this industry, because like I said, someone else is coming from behind. So it's this weird catch-22 where it's like, how do you know what to be? They've talked about, like, in interviews, they've talked about how pornography because it's always been primarily about the female porn star. Mm-hmm. The dude is just kind of like LA in the background, but ever present. The weird age dynamic where it's like, if you're in your middle 20s, you're kind of like out. You're in limbo, because it's kind of like, well, either you're young enough that you can do the like barely legal shit, or else you have to be like MILF, where you're like mommy, some version of like the stepmom or the whatever. And if you're in between, if you're not in with, like, if you're in between those categories, it's kind of like you don't fit into the fetish. So it's like, what are you gonna do? So then it's like, oh well, I'll do my cam thing, like
the OnlyFans
from home.
Yeah.
OnlyFans or whatever cam shit, you know, and so that's like a side thing, but it's kind of like such an oversaturation. Okay. So it's a very strange place that we found ourselves in now. Going back to this film, this is an LA that doesn't exist, but it's an LA that still does. Well, and it's different, but it's so.
It's a weird kind of artifact to a different time, to a different place, and it's I would honestly say that it's cleaned up and it's become more polished, but in a sense, it's
to a degree.
To a degree, but it's as depraved and it's as dangerous as it ever was. I believe this shit is fucked up. I believe that it's problematic for most people. I think that kids get into it too early, and I'm not talking about the people involved in the industry. I'm talking about 13, 14, 15-year-old kids who have phones that can access this shit. And I think it's a very psychologically, physically, and emotionally damaging factor of our lives. And when you watch this film, it's almost quaint in its depiction, because if you watch this and if you watch Boogie Nights, if you watch HBO's The Deuce, it's there's greater depth because you're dealing with the people that are actually involved in it. Hardcore's shortcoming, if you can call it that, because I don't really think it's a shortcoming. I think it's the story that's being told. You can only tell a story. And the perspective that you're coming at it from. This is a father's realization of his daughter's loss of innocence and his own recognition and understanding of his his closed-mindedness and his inability to be there for her. Her experience in the film is a totally different film. It's a totally different story. I think it's an unfair criticism of the, does the film have problems on its own? Yeah, but it's not that's the story that it's telling. I think George C. Scott is exceptional in this, and the fact that he was going through as much as he was going through, and at one point, in the film, there's the final scene where he kills the pimp Rattan because he knows, he has found out what is down the line for his daughter. And George C. Scott, Paul Schrader made the mistake of doing all the secondary shooting first and left George C. Scott in his trailer for a couple of hours. And during that time, he got fucked up. He got drunk. And the AD couldn't get him out. The producer couldn't get him out. They finally had to send Schrader. And Schrader went there. Have you heard this story?
No.
Schrader goes there. And George C. Scott, he goes in and he sees George C. Scott is in his underwear with an empty bottle of vodka in front of him. And George C. Scott is like, this is a piece of shit film. We're wasting our time. He said, you're a good writer, but you're a shit director.
Oh, wow.
And Paul Schrader is talking to a drunken George C. Scott. And he's like, okay, yeah, George, you're right. But we're making this film. And George C. Scott is like, I'm not coming out. We're not going to finish. This is a piece of shit.
So he branded it.
Yeah, he branded it. And finally, Schrader convinced him to come back by saying, if we miss this shot today, we're going to have to wait, because it was a Friday. We're going to have to wait till Monday to shoot it. Then we got to go to San Diego to shoot this other thing. That means we're going to add you're going to have to spend 3 more days shooting this. And George C. Scott told him, okay, I'll come out. We'll shoot it.
Fuck.
He got dressed. But then he told Paul Schrader, he said, I will shoot this scene under one condition. And Schrader's looking at him and he's like, fuck, what am I doing? It was like, it would have been so much easier to just make this with Richard Pryor, And George C. Scott tells him, you need to promise to me that you will never direct again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Schrader just looks at him and says, you're right. You're absolutely right. I swear that I will never direct another film again. So he said, okay, I come out. So they come out, they shoot the scene, boom. They move to San Diego. They're in a bar setting up the shot. And George C. Scott screams, Schrader! Paul Schrader goes over there and he was like, you son of a bitch. Because he was looking at Variety and they had announced American Gigolo with John Travolta at the time. He was like, you son of a bitch, you lied to me. And Paul Schrader looked at him and said, what do you want me to say? I lied to you. That's what was
shit. What is it?
That's what Schrader went through making this film. And I think part of the problem was George C. Scott didn't realize what the effect of this film was going to be, because they didn't really build a whole lot of sets. They went into these red light districts in San Francisco and San Diego. A lot of the shit that's LA is shot in San Diego, standing in for LA. There's that. And you can't tell because it's all so fucking dark. It's that world. But I don't think George C. Scott was prepared to go into the world that they were preparing. And a lot of the crew said, Paul Schrader says this in the commentary, the crew were excited about going in and seeing, naked women and this and that. And after 3 weeks of shooting down there were a lot of crew members that said, I'm so glad we're done with this shit, because I haven't been able to touch my wife in weeks.
Oh, shit.
There is a psychologically damaging element to pornography that people say that, it's you're making too much out of it. No, I think it fucks you up. but I think it's a good film. I think it's a really well made film. It's a cautionary tale film. It's a very reactive film, and I think it. I don't know whether it's this bad, but I've been that. There was this when I was living on Beverly, there was a real
Hmm.
seedy part of town on Western, just above Melrose. You remember that area?
Yep.
And there was a porn
That's
store in
like
there.
the like East Hollywood, right?
Yeah, it's East Hollywood. It's yeah, it's I always wanted to go into that store because I wanted to see if it was like hardcore. But the area scared me. And that's a lot of LA. It's like you're living in a normal you're living in a normal comfortable place, and two blocks down it's hell. It's Dante. I'm sitting over here
Yeah,
with in
there's
Larchmont, and then right over there there's some depravity going on. It's fucked
right.
up.
Yeah, I mean, like, and we're gonna talk actually next week. We're gonna talk about that with James Elroy
Yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah.
because you have Hancock Park on this side of you, and then and the aspirational shit where it's like, oh, if I go to Starbucks, I might see a fucking star,
Mhm.
whatever. Um, but then on the other side, it's like you've got the dark corners.
Yeah.
There's still a place on Alameda. There's still an adult bookstore that's still open. One of the few. And sometimes I'll pass there at night and I think to myself, what the fuck? Like, who goes there?
Yeah.
Who works there?
Yeah.
What is that? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
what is it like?
No, it's a very weird.
It, and yeah, and to even just like remember the video stores,
Hmm.
of our youth that there were the big chain ones that didn't have porn, but they had like whatever was pushing the edges of it. And then you had like your mom and pop, which had the fucking like the room with the beads or the
Yeah,
curtain or whatever it
I remember
was,
that.
and it was like, and if you went past that curtain, you were literally crossing the threshold into this other area.
Yeah.
When you fucking like, if and when anyone decides to go into those, especially nowadays, like where there's so few and far between these video stores
The internet
and the
made it
stories of
unnecessary. Yeah.
right and the idea of those arcades where you go in
Hmm.
and you like pay to see these like clips of these sex clips or whatever, but then they're also like there were these cruising spots for gay men, um, and there's the story that you told me one time about someone that you worked with that had a sexual story about one of
Yeah.
those and you're just listening to it and you're just going like, what the
The fuck.
fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's fucking crazy. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
where you think that so many of us at this point think we've seen it all. We think that we're so jaded that and even recently, like I wanted to get back into a certain level of like the heart of my book that I'm working on and some of this stuff. So sometimes I'll take the streets coming back home instead of the freeway. And then one night Leslie was like, "How was your drive?" And I was like, "Well, I passed a couple prostitutes at a crime scene. So I'm really feeling the work coming through here. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I really feel like I've got my nose to the wind, to the Santa Ana winds. I can, I'm back in LA, baby. You know what I mean? I'm like, there's a precursor to fucking James Elroy. And we're able to think that we're jaded, but from a distance, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, but it's not like Leslie said, "Hey, how was it? How was it going into that store?" I didn't fucking go in that store. I'm not fucking getting anywhere near that store.
Yeah.
Because as Clint Eastwood, as Dirty Harry says, a man's got to know his limitations.
Oh, yeah.
You cross into those places and it's like, you're going into areas that are going to push the limits of your imagination and your everything. In New York, I told you this. I'm not going to get into the depths of it, but I told you this story when we were on tour somewhere.
Yeah.
In New York, one time, I went. I was at a bar and I met some chick, and then we were like talking, and then we learned of an upstairs bar where we were told that it was, oh, it's a special bar, blah blah. We're like, what are you talking about? And oh, there's other girls. So it turned into this kind of like exploitative, we're gonna go in there for fun type of thing. Like, let's go on this adventure. And it was like a trans bar, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen, because I saw stuff that I was just like, I've never seen that happen in a bar before. I've never seen like someone pull out their cock in a bar. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've never seen that. And I wasn't ready for that.
How old were you?
I was 30.
Hmm.
I wasn't like out of middle school. I was an adult.
Yeah.
And I was still like, in that sense, kind of naive. You know what I mean? Like,
I think you get to a point in your life where you realize, I don't want to see things that I can't unsee. I know shit exists in this world. I know it's a fucking. I gotta have a little bit of faith. I gotta be able to retain a little bit of innocence, even at this age. And it is what you say. It's like, I'm jaded and I'm old, and I think I've seen it all. But
you're not.
But I may not, and I don't.
And
I don't want to know what I haven't seen. I really don't.
And also, it's like, I'm fucking being disrespectful right now just from being here, because it's like all fun and games just to go fucking like, because I didn't go into it from a sense of like, it was a tourist, a tourism kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that chick that I met at the bar and I both left. Not because we were grossed out or because we were like clutching our pearls and like, oh my God. I mean, there was a level of like, oh my God, because a model pulled out her cock, basically. Someone who looked like a fucking model pulled out her dick.
Yeah.
Which is it's just like, oh, what the fuck? But it was like, we're not in here for, or at least I was like, I'm not in here with a respectful state of mind. I was in here just out of a tourism thing.
The freak show
and
aspect
tourists
of it.
oftentimes,
And that's, you
right.
don't want to do that.
And I'm not, my presence is fucking with their party. And also, like, I don't want to get somehow put in a situation that I don't want to be in. So, and when I very well known that I'm the one who walked in here. So we left and we went our separate ways. And that place is not what I mean. What I'm bringing up about the place is that not that it's like exploitation or porn industry or trafficking. No, that place is where people of a subculture, of a vibe, go and do their thing, and that's cool. What I'm talking about is that there are areas, and we're getting into subculture, we're getting into all this other shit, where it's like, you don't know, you may think you know where you are, but you really fucking don't. And there are areas that, unless you're like gonna pursue that, like at a certain point, it's kind of like, there's travel and there's tourism.
Yeah.
When you travel, you go and you walk those streets, you mingle. It's like Tom Anderson said in Los Angeles Plays Itself. You learn the city on the bus and on the street. And it's like, I think it would have been a different story had had it just been like, oh, and we did. We went and had a drink, but there was also the element of the way it was like sold to us. It was like, oh, well, this is a different kind of bar and blah blah, and it was almost like a dare kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I get that.
But it's like these subcultures. It's like what I told you earlier before we started recording. Your hobbies, that quote, your hobbies can entertain you, your passions will destroy you.
Yeah.
Or they can destroy you, not they will, sure. They can destroy you. There are these corners, some really bright, some really dark, that can have a lot of fulfillment to them and a lot of destruction in them. Either way. And this is not to say, don't fucking go to those bars. Go to those bars. Pull your dick out if that's what they do. And when in Rome, you know what I mean? But like, when in Rome, but be respectful of Rome and also know, hey, I'm in Rome.
Yeah.
And you can't go to Hollywood expecting Hollywood.
No, you can't.
Sometimes it's there's a reason why Morrison in LA Woman says driving down your freeway, midnight alleys roam, cops in cars, topless bars, never saw one so alone. You know?
Yeah.
Are you a lucky little lady in the city of light or another lost angel, city of night? You got to ask that.
It's a valid question. Ask yourself that. Watch the movie. Take that plunge as safely as you can.
And baby, give us some money. buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. Aptly, today this episode is dedicated to none other than someone.
We appreciate it, folks. Bye-bye now.
Buy coffee. Tell a friend. Tune in and watch this.
Thank you very much.